Justin and Mac's review of Xi'an.
And Xi'an is based on the historical terracotta army that was discovered in the 70s in China. And we go back 2,000 years, and we're not discovering it, we're actually making it in the game. There's really three things that I find most interesting about the game. It's an area control game, but it's an area control game where...
Of three different areas.
Of three different areas, right. So you can, in the game, build new terracotta army figures with one type of currency, which is...
Brick or clay.
Clay, right? And the deeper the characters are...
The more clay it costs.
The more clay it costs, but you get more points for doing so.
In the A region.
The A region, which is the front.
2. In the middle region, the B region, it costs 3 brick. And in the C region, the farthest back but most points, cost 5 brick.
Exactly. And, in the game, the rewards that you get, I think, are very balanced. If you build in the easiest region, which is 2 bricks, right? Or 2 clay, you get points, but you also can get a little bit of money, or you can get some pigment for some painting.
Which is actually a really interesting part of the game, because you work up, you build 5, you spend 5 clay to build a guy. It's not yours. You still have to spend the pigment to paint it into your color.
And then that makes it yours. And then there's 3 currencies in the game. There's the clay, which is to make these neutral characters, but get you some immediate points and a little bit of a benefit.
There's pigment, which will, depending on what the king wants, will allow you to paint some of the brown characters in different regions.
And that changes every round, so the pigment that you might have might suddenly change the next round.
Lowest value, or there's all numbers on the different ones, and it doesn't really matter until the end of the round, where the lowest value will come off and a different color will come on, which could end up being the same color, or it could be a different color.
Right, we never know. I think they call it the Emperor's Command or something like that. What he demands. He comes into there and he says, you know what, that's too much blue. Let's have some red. And you're like, right?
But I have 4 blue.
Now, one of the, a tiny little disconnect with the painting of the characters is that despite what colors you have to give up for the painting, you're just putting in your character. So it might ask for blue and green.
But you're still just putting
in orange or whatever. And I guess that could be, maybe you're painting also the surrounding territory or helping paint someone else's thing. Whatever. But that's fine. Then there is the money in the game.
Which is actually more important than one might think.
Yes.
Because one main thing is to buy weapons, which actually give you a lot of points. Because there's 2 different main types of weapons.
Right, 2 genres.
Wood
and leather.
How the wood is in the background, and this one, the leather's in the background. And if you collect all 3 types of the leather or all 3 types of the wood, you will get 10 points, or 2, 5, 10, depending on how many you get. And then plus, you can see how this one says B right there. It's a little bit hard to read. But at the end of the game, if you give this weapon to a guy that you have painted in the B region, you get an additional 3 points.
Exactly right. And so depending on what cards you're taking, now the money is only used.
Or there's one other use for it.
I guess if you need to go into a territory that if you need to use a card that someone else has used, you have to pay them $1. But primarily, the main use of bricks is only
to build
the
main
neutral
use
guys.
Of money is to build weapons for your painted guys, and the pigment is to paint your guys.
Right. So there's 3 currency types. The game doesn't last too long because if you have your whole deck of cards, but you get a certain amount of cards, but you can only use 50% of them.
Because you will draw 2 or 4.
4.
And then you choose which one you want to use. Let's say I wanted to use this one. I would put this one in front. And then since this says a 3, I would go third, or not third. It'd rank based off the highest number.
Right.
I'd go first. And then I'd get the front ability, but I will never get this.
Right, and so that one's out.
Because they both get discarded and you never use them again.
Right, and each card has a couple of different things that you could use. You could either use the card for its main ability, if you decide to use this card, or you could get the smaller ability.
Which is usually just a pigment of the color.
And the designers were really clever about how they assigned numbers to the cards. So the higher the number, which means that you would have
first.
a proclivity to go first.
Also has the better stuff on it.
So you're either using
do I want to go first, or do I want to get this really good benefit?
Right, and then the low numbers have less, so you might say, well,
I don't really want that, but then you also could probably go last, which will limit you on what you could do there if it's like the second turn, and then you could only have 4 in each region. Or you have to pay other people money to go where they are.
And then there's also this race to what buildings you're going to be using at the end of your turn, because your turn is not only just playing a card and getting its ability, but also then subsequently going to one of the 4 buildings and either building a guy if you have the resources for it, painting a guy if you have the resources for it, buying a weapon if you have the resources for it, and if you don't, you could always walk down the chancellor or the council line getting a bonus tile, which you could use either on that round or on a different round.
The lane, whatever it is, it's actually really important, because if you're higher up on someone, you will break ties.
Yes, you break ties, all ties.
Endgame scoring or endgame winning.
Let's talk a little bit about the components in the game. I find the components okay.
Because the cards are nice, but nothing special.
Nothing special.
Or the art on the cards is pretty
The art is cool.
Because if I zoom in on the back here, you can see that there's detail instead of just the pure color.
And then each different faction, each different color has its own symbol on the back, which is historically correct. The art on the front is nice. One thing I find very annoying in games is when they try to, like the 5s, the 6s, and the 1s, they try to make them look almost semi-Chinese, and they give them weird, like the letter B and the letter C looks like a T.
Look at that 5.
You know, I get it. Just write, if you're doing it in Chinese, they add Chinese letters to other parts of the games. Just write the letter B. You know, be clear. It's a moment of thought when I'm looking at something, especially since you're looking at someone else's card and seeing what they have, and you're like, well, is that an S? Why is there a line on top of that? It's just kind of silly to do those things.
But then one component that is really nice is the people, because they're nice, hard plastic. Or only one disadvantage is they were most likely a plastic mold, and some of them didn't dry properly.
So some of them look a little weird, but they're fine, and they're very clear which ones are neutral, which ones are in your color. They're detailed enough, and I've seen people who paint them.
And the people that do paint them look really nice.
Right. The bonus tiles are really nice, and that they create this panorama of where the location was in history. That was really cool too. So I think the components are nice, with the exception of the numbers, which are because basically the game is a race in many different ways. You're racing down the track to get primacy in ties and also getting the bonus tiles. It's a race to build the guys to get the points on the board and the advantages of that. It's a race to color your guys, at least in the different regions, because there's endgame scoring with that. It's a miniature race to get your guys to touch, because you get a little bit of points if you have orthogonally touching guys. But you also need to paint guys, because at the end of the game, even if you have your various weapons, they have A, B, and C.
You still need to give them to people.
You need to give them to people, and you can't give the same weapon to multiple people. So they give you, I think, like 6 guys or so that you can paint. The most I've ever painted was 4. I've played it now 4 times, and I've enjoyed it all 4 times. The first time I played it was with 2 players with our other member of our game group. And I was not thrilled with it at the end of the first game as a 2-player. Then we realized we did a couple of things wrong in the game, and we played it then as a 3-player. Much improved in my estimation. It was a lot more...
And then 4-player is probably going to be insane.
Right.
With the
One of the things that I think about the scaling of the game is that it doesn't matter if you have 2, 3, or 4 players. When you're doing the initial setup of where because at the beginning of the game there's going to be 6 of these guys out on the board, the neutral ones that anyone can paint. That doesn't change if there's 2, 3, or 4 people. So with 2 people, it's very easy to start painting guys. With 3, it got down to the point that there was like 1, and
you painted it.
You painted it.
And you're like, none of us has any bricks.
Now someone's got to build.
And none of us had any bricks.
Right. And with 4 people, with only 6 characters
probably
out,
go away like after
very
the
quickly.
first 2 or 3 rounds.
But I guess it has a different feeling in the game. In the 4 plays that we've done, there's end bonus tiles that if you can get to the end of the track, if you do your movements down the track, You could have an end game scoring bonus that is only yours. I've played 4 times and no one has gotten to that point. Everyone's used other actions because with so many limited actions,
You would have to do that every round.
you would have to do that you have to do that every round, which is a lot. Although I got to the 5th area, which was here, and that got me the extra action. And
Which could have gotten you to the 5th area.
It absolutely could have. I could have gotten the end game bonus. That's a very good thought. You could use that extra action, but I use the extra action to paint a guy. Another aspect of the game that I liked, and if you could talk about this a little bit, are your assistants that you could hire.
Because in your deck, there are some green cards, and they're very cool because once you use them, you play them out in front of you, and they give you some sort of benefit for the rest of the game, which is pretty powerful, especially if you get them in the first couple rounds.
They don't give you points in usually the first couple of rounds.
Because you can see on the bottom how there's points, and the later the round, the more point. But
Because
the earlier the round, the more you get to use the benefit.
Right,
So it's balanced.
and it's when they come out too in your thing, because your hand is going to be random. You have a deck of cards, and you're going to
You're
get
only
to
going to
use.
get 4.
You're going to only get 4 each round,
And you're only going to get to play 2.
right.
So you might, like for me, I ended up first round with 3 of these in my hand, so I couldn't play all 3.
Oh, right. So you have to use the number and that's the really interesting aspect of the game. You're like, that you'll never get that card again. Unlike a lot of deck games where you say, well, I don't use it now, I'll use it later.
But this one, you'll never get them again.
Yeah,
and all of the cards are unique.
And all the cards are unique, exactly, yeah.
So you will never get that card ever again. You might get something pretty close to it, but no. And actually, then, what would be your rating?
My rating in the game overall, I'm at 7.5.
I am at a 7.
You're at a 7.
And I was thinking about 7.5, but I'm going to go with 7.
I think 7 is fair. I think 7.5 is fair. It's the duration of the game is just right. You could play it in under an hour. The rules you could teach in about 10 minutes. But the thoughtfulness of the thing, and when you're going between 2 cards, do I have this one in front? Do I do this one in front to get the number? Do I want this ability? And you only have a little bit. And you only have, ultimately, 6 rounds in the game. It goes by very quickly, so you have to really economize what you're doing. And I had a really good time playing the game. I definitely recommend it. It's not stellar, the most memorable game, but it is a very solid, enjoyable game. And I give it a 7.5. You give it a 7. So we're at
7.25.
Yeah, 7.25.
7.25 is the Justin Max official rating of Xi'an. Oh! Oh! Oh!